Hey there! How are you, diligent scholar? My name is Michael Ricotta. Allow me to most cordially welcome you to Stephen Academy's Video-on-Demand lessons for Advanced Placement, Politics, and Government. In these lessons, you will get all the conceptual information you need and all the problem-solving guides you desire to get the coveted 5 on the upcoming AP test, whenever that test might be upcoming for you. This course provides you with all the essential facts and all the essential problem-solving skills you will need to get a 5 on the test. Not only that, this course provides you with historical background essential to the test that you will not find in any other Advanced Placement, United States Government and Politics lesson or prep book. Now, for this course, for both the problem-solving and conceptual lessons, you're going to need a textbook. The textbook, and an excellent one it is AP Government and Politics for the United States by Barron's, 2012 edition. This book you must have for all the conceptual and problem-solving lessons. So, purchase it, take the class. Now, I want to give you one final word of encouragement. Take this class and get the 5 you deserve. This class gives you everything you need, and you won't find the material given here anywhere else. I guarantee you, you take the lessons and you'll be happy. So, I hope to see you in lesson number 1. Hello, diligent scholar, and welcome to lesson number 1 of Stephen Academy's AP course for the AP Government exam, United States Government. You're playing in the big leagues now. This is an AP course. So, AP standing for Advanced Placement, this class will be handled more or less like a college classroom. I will use advanced language and I will use some fairly advanced concepts. So at the very outset, I'd like to say, if any of you, or there's presumably only one of you at the other end of that camera there, if you, diligent scholar, have any questions, concerns, or comments, or you want just more explanation about something, simply log on to your Stephen Academy VOD account, log on to the website, and click on My Online Classroom. All the information you need can be sent by me to you. So if you have a question, let me know by using My Online Classroom. I just want to say that at the very outset. Now, let me talk for a minute about government, United States government. This class, in a way, is very conceptual and more theoretical than, for example, United States history. So although this class will be divided into 2 sections, as those of you maybe from my history classes, World or US, might remember, this is going to be a little different because we focus more on the theory of government rather than a number of historical events that happened, which makes it somewhat more interesting, but somewhat more complicated when dealing at the advanced placement level in preparation specifically for your student, I should say, the advanced placement test. So this course has been fine-tuned so that you can get that 5 that you desire, with a special emphasis on writing, both FRQ and DBQ. Which I should mention. Because this is an AP test, there are not just multiple choice questions, as there are on the SAT-2 United States History Test, World History Test, whatever SAT-2 test there might be, they're all multiple choice. Not so with the Advanced Placement Test. There's a multiple choice section, there's a free response question, which we're going to spend a lot of time on. I'm going to teach you how to write the perfect essay for the AP Government Test, US Government Test, and the DBQs, which perhaps are the most complicated of the lot. Those are database questions where they give you, the test makers give you, the test gives you either quotes or political cartoons or something like that, and they ask you to write a coherent essay based on that. We're going to be spending time on that as well. And to go along with this course, you will need Barron's, AP U.S. Government and Politics, and this will be the 2012 edition of this text. You must have this text before continuing with the class. At the end of every lesson, or probably almost every lesson, at the end of every section, let me put it like that, you're going to get a homework assignment that has to do with this book, using information in this book. So you're going to get the concept again beside the lecture, backed up in the book, and you're going to get your FRQs and your multiple choice questions at the end of every segment, or at the end of every theme. We'll get to that. But have this book, all right? Barron's AP U.S. Government and Politics 2012 edition. So, diligent student, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in and talk about AP United States Government. It's critical, absolutely critical, since this class is very theoretical, that you pay attention terms. The key terms, and I'm big on key terms. Those of you who've taken my history classes know key terms are the linchpin to give you the maximum score on whatever academic test you might take, whether it's SAT2 history, SAT2 biology, whether it's AP government, AP history, AP literature. Key terms are the key to success. So pay attention to the key terms. They will serve you well. Now, that said, let's start with some key terms. And the biggest key term for AP U.S. government is government itself, right? And I should mention, before I get stuck into it, I'm very excited, as you can tell. I've been doing history for so long. It's great to do government again, which is theoretical and very interesting. The first key term we're going to discuss is government itself. What is government? Well, we can say that government, denotatively, that is, in terms of an accurate definition, is simply an institution, a formal organization that creates public policy. And I'm going to define public policy in a moment, so hold on to that. That creates public policy. And public policy comes in three forms. First, we have promotional. And then we have regulatory. And thirdly, we have distributive. And perhaps those of you with who are still really getting a handle on some sophisticated English terms, once again, maybe it will serve you well to have a dictionary by your side, because this is a class, rather, let me take a step back here. The AP test is designed so that you don't have to take the class in college. It gives you college level credit as well as help you get into the university you want to get into, the upper tier colleges. So this class is going to be taught at a collegiate level. So have a dictionary by your side, or once again, if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to help you. That's why I'm giving you this class, or lecturing with this class. So if you have any questions or concerns, I'm a nice guy. Go ahead, log on to your Stephen Academy account, my online classroom, and they will get your message to me right away. So keep in mind, you always have my support as we go through this. Now, the three different types of public policy. I'm going to give you an example of each. A promotional public policy would be, for example, let's say in the New Deal. We're going to go into the New Deal as we talk about public policies. This is the Agricultural Adjustment Act. This was a policy that paid farmers during the Great Depression not to grow crops. The government is promoting an idea. Regulatory. Here we have the Environmental Protection Agency to make sure that companies aren't polluting the environment too much. And distributive, this would be welfare. That is the government paying for social services for people. So government is the institution that creates public policy. Public policy comes in three forms. Right at the very beginning, I want to give you another concept. That is, there's two sectors to society. And this class is kind of interesting. Well, it is very interesting. Government is. As I said, it's very theoretical. So we're going to draw on a little history. But we're also going to draw on a little economics to fully understand what really the mechanism of AP United States government is. So in an economic respect here, we have two sectors of society, the public sector and the private sector. The public sector, as you might imagine, is all organizations to do with government. The private sector is all things to do with private business. So I'll say this is independent. So an example of a public sector organization would be, and since this is United States history, I'll use a United States example, the United States Postal Service. That is part of the public sector. The private sector, I'll just shoot an answer out, I'll say Apple. Apple Computers. This is a private company not owned by the government. So I just want to give you this at the very outset. As well, so that's what government does. Government simply creates public policy, which comes in three forms. and Politics, the second part of our course title, AP United States Government and Politics. Politics can be defined simply, or fairly simply, as who gets what, when, how, and why. So who gets what, when, how, and why. So, who gets what? Who gets the right to vote? What? So, who? People getting the right to vote. When do they get it? How do they get it? Why do they get it? That's just an example. That's a very broad definition. So you can see the term politics itself is a very organic term, and we're going to be going more into that as we continue. Just again, very basic definition at the beginning. I want to bring up two terms again: conservative and liberal. Whenever we talk about politics or government in the modern sense in the United States, it always seems to come down to these terms. Conservatives have a view of politics, and liberals have a view of politics as well. Conservatives, basically, we can define as being traditional. That is, conservatives look back in the past and they say, these things were done correctly. Even the word, the root right, conserve, you want to conserve what was done. So you look back in the past and you say, hey, you know, people had the right idea in the past. Liberals we can define as progressive. That is, they say, no, don't look to the past. Let's do things in a new way. So that's the basic fundamental divide in politics, and we're going to be going over this more and more. But just to give you the basic term at the beginning, and we can define this on something I'm going to flesh out later, but I'll introduce now, the political spectrum. The political spectrum goes from the left to the right. The left is more liberal. The right is more conservative. So on the far left, you would get a doctrine like communism. On the far right, you would get a doctrine like reactionism. That is, bring back the kings and the queen. So that's really very right-wing, very conservative. So when someone says you're very right-wing, that means you're very conservative. When someone says you're very left-wing, that means you're very liberal. And of course, smack dab in the middle, we have the moderates, who believe, well, you have a little conservatism and a little liberalism, put them together, and that's the correct path. Take a little from the past, a little from the future, and you're set to go. So, there we are. Those are your definitions for government and politics. Let us continue on by talking about modern governments. So, one hallmark you can identify government by is what makes up government, that institution that creates public policy. And we can say that most modern governments, really almost every government in the history of the world that we know of, maybe like the chief of the cavemen didn't have it, but every modern government, and most governments throughout history, have had bureaucracy. From the French word bureau, that's a desk, cracy is to rule. So rule by the desk, these are the administrators of the government. Whenever you go to the airport and someone stamps your passport, whenever you go to the DMV to renew your driver's license, whenever you write a letter to the government saying this or that, you're dealing with the bureaucracy, the administrative section of government. And this includes, let's define it here, independent executive agencies, for example, the Department of Justice. It includes government corporations. A great example here is PBS. Those of you in the States watching this might know what PBS. Those over here in the Republic of Korea may not. PBS is the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, or the Public Broadcasting System. Sesame Street, Elmo, Big Bird, right? That's all government corporation. It's part of the public sector, not the private sector, because it's funded by the government, by the public, not independently or privately owned. And also, we have the cabinet, which are the president's executive directors. So this would be the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense. All of these are examples of items that are part, or entities that are part of government bureaucracy. Now, government is usually defined. So let me erase this here. How should I say? Government is defined. It has a static role. And for example, in the United States, government is defined by the all-important document we're going to be talking about time and again in this class, and I'll put it below our government here, the United States Constitution. So government is defined, but politics evolves. That is, who gets what, or who gets what, when, how, and why, that changes all the time. And if there's one thing you can take it to the bank on, from me, is that politics has evolved since day one. But government has to be defined, really. Whether you have a dictator, and that's more comparative, but whether you have a king, queen, dictator, democracy, republic, government is defined, politics evolves. So, in America, the political evolution takes a very interesting turn. And I'm going to talk specifically about that. Your book, The Baron's Text, talks a little bit about it, but I want to talk about it in greater depth because it will give you a larger conceptual understanding of where this course is going from the beginning. So, American political evolution. There are basically two schools of thought in American politics. From the very beginning, there have always been two schools of thought to where we are now in America, where basically there's two schools of thought. The basic schools of thought in American politics can be divided into the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Now, properly defined, this is a group that existed, or these two groups existed, right around the time when the Constitution was being written and ratified. In the larger context, though, it's a paradigm. And there's a nice advanced word for you. A paradigm is simply a way of looking at things. So if you're a conservative, for example, you look at things through a different paradigm than a liberal would. You have a different frame of mind. If you're a liberal, same is true. These are the two fundamental paradigms in American government and politics. A federalist believes in a strong central government. The government needs to be strong. For example, what the Congress does in Washington, D.C., what the American government does in Washington, D.C., where it's located, that's the important thing. And Anti-Federalist says no. It's all about states' rights and individual liberties. And these two groups, these two paradigms, have inhabited numerous political parties in American history. For a while, the Federalists we have the Federalist Party, that died out. The Whig Party takes over from the Federalists, the Republicans take over from the Federalists, and then they switch. The Anti-Federalists, we begin with the Democratic Republicans, we move to the Democrats, and so on and so forth. So although America has many different, or has had many different political parties, they basically all reduce down to these two paradigms. Do you want a strong central government, or do you want more states' rights? Some examples of these controversies would be the Bill of Rights, the National Bank, and general evolving debates. So, keep this in mind as we continue forward. This is the history of American political evolution. It takes place under the paradigms of federalism and anti-federalism. Now, continuing on, once again, this is a course on American government and politics. The basic function of government in the Constitution is outlined in something called the Preamble, a super important part of the Constitution which comes before the various parts. So it's the Preamble. And how should I give you a good solid definition? U.S. government U.S. government's goals, are defined by the preamble to the Constitution. And I won't write all the preamble down here, although it's not too long because you have it in your book. But I will read it to you. And the preamble to the United States Constitution is this: we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Now, let's break it down. The first part, we, the people of the United States. Who gives the power to the Constitution? It's not the president or the Congress or the courts. It wasn't a king or a queen. It's the people themselves of the United States that create the Constitution. To form a more perfect union, to keep the country together, establish justice, pretty straightforward. Ensure domestic tranquility, make sure that everything's peaceful inside the United States. Provide for the common defense, so other countries can't take the United States over. And one of the most controversial sections, or the most open to interpretation, I should say, promote the general welfare. Now that means make people good. Make sure the country's doing well. And indeed, that's probably one of the vaguest parts of the preamble. And secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, make sure the country is free and that the people who live in the future in this country will remain free. Do ordain and establish this Constitution. So it's we the people, or the people of the United States, that ordain and establish the Constitution. So, preamble, very, very important. Look it over again in your text. Now, the U.S. government's goals are defined by the preamble, but since the beginning, we've had a trend with the United States government. It's been getting bigger. From the beginning to now, I'm speaking to you in November of 2013, has constantly gotten larger. So there's been a growth of government in the United States. And this would be, for example, things like Social Security, Medicare, social programs that would not have been dreamed of by the framers of the Constitution, but are part and parcel of American government today, and indeed a critical part of the United States. So the government's been getting larger by adding social programs. And they've added these programs basically through what we call the implied powers. Because these items, or these programs, for example, Social Security is a public pension system. We're going to talk about all this later, but just to give you a good introduction. Social Security is a public pension plan. Medicare is health care for everyone 65 and over. Now, that would be implied in promoting the general welfare, wouldn't it? You can see what I mean. So the goal of government can be interpreted, and that brings us to our next point. There's two ways of looking at the Constitution. Just as there's two fundamental political paradigms in the United States, there's two fundamental constitutional paradigms, and they fall into this camp. So let's talk about now constitutional interpretation. So we have the Constitution. Everyone agrees that it's there, right? You can go to Washington, D.C. and view it. The two ways of looking at it are strict constructionism and loose constructionism. And generally, not all the time, but most of the time, conservatives in the United States tend to be strict constructionists, that is, right-wingers, and liberals, or left-wingers, tend to be loose constructionists. Now, what does this mean? I won't write it down because there's a bit to say. Strict constructionism is this: the government can only do what is specifically stated in the Constitution. That is, if the Constitution doesn't say anything about Medicare, there shouldn't be any Medicare program in the United States. There should not be anything implied. It's specific. A loose constructionist would say, and this is also called the living Constitution, a loose constructionist would say, no, the Constitution's meant to be interpreted. We have implied ideas. What does promoting the general welfare mean? Well, we have to get a general idea of what that means. We have to kind of think abstractly. So it's the idea that the Constitution was meant to change. Strict constructionists, no. Constitution never changes. Loose constructionists, changes all the time. Now, you can see here we're just kind of giving you the smorgasbord of everything to come. The electorate. You can see the root word there is election. These are the people who vote. The electorate in a democracy, or America is not quite a democracy. It's a representative republic. But that has democratic elements in it. The electorate is the base upon which politics occurs. Now, politics is who gets what, when, where, and how, or when, why, and how, when, how, and why. And that takes place on the people who wield the power, the voters. Now, we have an evolution that brings us to American democracy, specifically American Representative Republic. There's elements of Greece, Rome, Salem, early Virginia and Jamestown colony. So just to give you an example, ancient Greece, specifically ancient Athens, had direct democracy. Rome was far more similar to the United States in that it had a representative republic. What's the difference? In a democracy, people vote, or denotatively, in the actual definition, in a democracy, everyone votes on the law themselves. That is, raise your hand if you want this, put your hand down if you don't want it. In a republic, I elect people to vote for me. So I elect John to go to the government, and John will vote on my behalf. Now, in Salem, we get the element of majority rule. And again, we get representative government from Virginia colony. So all these elements contribute. Greece came first, then Rome, then Salem, then Virginia, Jamestown colony. All these elements contribute to the American Representative Republic, or democratic form of government. So, the electorate is the base upon which politics occurs. And we can look at some recent elections to see this. So, I'll talk about just a few elections. 1992, 1996, 2000, 2004, 2008. So, in 1992, in the election of 1992, we had 3 candidates. So I'll just go through this. We're going to be getting more of this later, so I won't write it all down here. We had 3 candidates. We had Bill Clinton, George Herbert Walker Bush, and a third party, that great rarity, the rara avis, or rare bird in American politics, Ross Perot, third party candidate. So in 1992, the electorate was very interested in the economy. So too in 1996 when Bill Clinton was reelected. When Bill Clinton was reelected, the economy was doing very well. So it was a shoo-in for him to get another term, despite a number of scandals. In 2000, we have a very contested election where the Supreme Court ended up deciding who would be president, and we'll talk more about that later, and the nuances of that election, whereby a recount of votes was denied and George W. Bush was acknowledged to be the winner. 2004, after the events of 9/11, people were more interested on national security, more interested in national security than the economy per se, and they perceived that Bush was doing a good job handling the war on terror. And in 2008, of course, we have the election of the first African-American president in the history of the United States, Barack Obama. And I see I've run out of time, diligent student. I've been talking and talking. So we will end it here, this lesson. And because we haven't finished all the material in this section, that is the theory of modern government, which is lesson number 1, there won't be any homework for the next lesson. What I encourage you to do, diligent student, is to not take a break right now. Well, go get some coffee, have some ramyun or something. But as soon as this lesson is over, go ahead and plug in number 2. It's only an hour. And in the next lesson, we'll be discussing interest groups, policymaking institutions, democracy in America, and we'll be doing our first free response question together that I'm going to go over with you. I'm going to give you the prompt that I created, and then I'm going to solve it with you using a lecture. And then I'll assign you the homework for the next lesson that we'll go over together. So I implore you, since you've done so well at the beginning, hang out for a sec and watch the second episode, and we'll go ahead and finish lesson number 1 then. Until then, I'm thrilled to have you aboard AP U.S. Government and Politics. Michael Ricotta. I'll see you in a minute, I hope.